yeah, we see a lot of it, but seriously, everybody, if you're watching this and you think you're in love with somebody online that you have never held in your presence, don't give them 10 cents ever. And I've had very, very
Great
smart
goal.
people. Yeah. It's just there's a reason that you can't, and they lie, they make up the best justifications. Oh, I'm on government contracts, I'm a doctor here. All the doctor pictures they had were some poor plastic surgeon down in South America, just doing his job. Now he's all over the internet as a con artist.
Andy, thank you so much for joining me today on Who's Behind the Headline. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
So, first, to start off, it would be great to have the people watching get to know you a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about your career, your background, and how you got into private investigation.
Well, my name is Andy Kay. I own Kay and Associates Investigations here in Los Angeles. We work globally, but we're based out of Beverly Hills and Calabasas. Had this 33 years, and I started out working with the Attorney General's office, and I worked on several federal task forces, and then decided that I'd rather work in the private sector than law enforcement. So I started this company up and been doing it ever since.
And I guess, we can tell the people watching that we were having some technical difficulties. So we did have this discussion beforehand, but I think it's important to kind of reiterate again. Talk to me a little bit about some of the pros and cons about being a private investigator.
Yeah, and obviously the best one is working for yourself is always nice. You can choose what you want to do to a degree as long as you're financially able, and that's the biggest benefit. The biggest drawback is when you're working a bigger budget on the things that you're investigating, you can send 30, 40 guys out to investigate a case and chase every small lead until you come up with something. When a client's paying for the case, you don't necessarily very often have that going for you. Now, it does happen sometimes where you have clients that have huge sums of money and they don't care, and they're willing to spend the money for the ability to get to the bottom of whatever it is that they're wanting to find out.
Do you step in a lot of times when clients feel like maybe they're not getting the answers that they're looking for from law enforcement?
Quite often, actually, yes. A lot of times we're working right alongside with law enforcement, and if we can get out there and chase leads that they can't or won't chase down for whatever reasons, a lot of times they have to take into account the ability that percentage of a chance that you have in solving the case. So a lot of cases have a very low probability of being solved, a lot of burglaries, things like that. So they kind of don't bother. And what happens is we get out there and we do the work that they used to do. We'll do the canvassing and the interviews and look for cameras and all those things. And a lot of times we'll find enough evidence that gets to a point where we can get it back to law enforcement, and then they have a higher probability of solving the case along with what we gave them, and we can work together to get it solved. And the good thing for law enforcement is a lot of times those criminals tie to other crimes, and then it becomes a bigger win for them.
So it's kind of like, in a way, a partnership with law enforcement.
In a way, yeah. And as a private investigator, a lot of times you're opposed to law enforcement. Sometimes we do criminal defense, post-conviction cases and everything. And in those cases, it's our belief and our hope that our clients are not the bad guy. And we actually end up going to prove that. And, sometimes we're very successful in doing that. And so in those situations, we're not the best friends of the law enforcement.
And so I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about harassment and stalking cases, because I feel like in, my professional career, but also in the headlines, we see a lot of the end results of stalking, I believe, usually turn into homicide or some type of violent attack. And unfortunately, by the time we see that, it's too late, right? So can you talk to me first, starting off, just a little bit about your experience with harassment and stalking cases as a private investigator?
Sure, we get tons of stalking cases, and they range from, stalking ranges from a wide variety of activities, whether it be electronic stalking, online stalking, physical stalking, recording devices in vehicles, tracking devices in vehicles. There's all types of it that we investigate all the time. And a lot of times, Police can't go every time somebody calls up and says, hey, I have a stalker. I saw this guy and this conversation came back to me. There's a lot of times people manifest these things themselves and then they become paranoid and then everything becomes a bigger thing. They start noticing everything. And then, it's like, I noticed that guy cutting the tree across the way, kept looking in my window and, obviously it probably has nothing to do with anything, but at that point, they're so paranoid that everything has to do with something. A lot of times we're able to calm people down, and a lot of times we actually do find that they are being stalked for one reason or another. Some of it's financial, some of it's, somebody that's amorous or that has developed an interest in this person. Online is not always your friend. I recommend that all of my clients be very, very careful with anything they put personally online. And the internet's become a tool for stalkers. You can find a lot of information on a lot of people. So there's things that you as a citizen, if you want to protect yourself from stalkers, can do to make it so you're not such an easy target.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up too, because I think sometimes, a lot of times, we have in our head like a very specific view of stalking, like, someone following you around in a car, peeping into your windows. And while that, that is a version of stalking, and I guess we will probably talk about that tonight, the online stalking now has blown up. It makes it so much easier almost for people to peer into your life at the same time.
And by then you've got somebody that's dealing with some kind of psychological issue that is, when they get to the point where they start showing up at people's houses, it becomes a problem. And that's somebody that we want to intervene with as soon as possible.
And you talked a little bit about law enforcement. Like, I feel like there are a lot of limitations when it comes to kind of what can be done on harassment and stalking. It seems almost like sometimes a threat has to physically be made against your life for law enforcement really to, whether that's, help you with a restraining order or actually, put that person in jail. It seems like sometimes like words aren't always taken seriously.
And they're not always seriously intended either. People make idle threats all the time. And so it has to be kind of what they call a credible threat. It has to be something that's substantiated by something. Now, if you get calls on the phone, somebody, says, hey, I'm going to kill you. I mean, that happens a lot more around Halloween. Kids get off on calling other people and trying to scare them. So maybe not a credible threat. Police aren't going to probably show up at your door for saying that.
And I wanted to talk to you specifically about the Kay Scott case, because that's a big case that's in the headlines right now. And, there were reports of when she went missing, her family had told law enforcement and the media that she was being harassed by someone online. She, either online or through text message, through calls, someone was harassing her. And then we're now finding out that the man that has been charged with her murder has been accused and even charged with stalking other women. And we see a video of him peering into a woman's windows and trying to break into her home. And I feel like, what Kay Scott did was right about telling family that she was being stalked. But like, in that situation, if you have a client who's going through something like that, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, if they recognize it and it gets to the point like what King was doing, where he's peering through windows and he's got a history, that's a very overt act. I mean, to go and start looking through women's windows when you've been rebuffed, things like that, that's a serious threat. If we have clients that call us for things like that, we immediately put security on and we have them get away from the places that they normally stay, and make them a more difficult person to find. Stop using social media completely, all those things. Because if we think it's a credible threat, we become a lot more proactive. And we see it a lot with a lot of the celebrity clients that we have. Being in LA for 33 years, I have a lot of high profile clients, and men and women. And at that time, we sometimes put what we call CP units, close protection units, around those people to make sure that they can relax, do their job, and not have to be super hyper aware of their surroundings all the time. But the first thing everybody should do is be very aware of your surroundings. Situational awareness is the primary thing. I have 4 daughters. They all pay attention to what vehicles are around them. If something shows up that looks menacing, they recognize it, they know how to prepare for it. They're always looking for a strategic exit. Being aware is the best thing, especially as a woman, that you can do to protect yourself from these kind of people, because stalking is the passive act. But it's also the primary act and the overt act that gets them to the point where they're committing crimes, and they're usually violent crimes.
Yeah, and can you talk to me a little bit about why like stalking and harassment, whether it's like, virtual harassment, is so dangerous? Because I think sometimes people can just think, oh, you're getting cyberbullied, like that's not a big deal. But why is that like obsessive stalking/harassment behavior so potentially dangerous?
Well, it's dangerous. Here's the thing. There's a lot of keyboard warriors out there that are making idle threats that aren't going to, it's some kid in India or Pakistan or the Philippines or something that jumps on and wants to just, mess with pretty girls on the internet, right? Get a rise out of them. He's getting attention that he doesn't get in his normal life. And he's got no intention of jumping on an airplane, or no ability to jump, to afford to do such a thing. And so it's just a game for them. And the police have to recognize that that's a lot of it. It's a lot of idle crap. The guy's a dick. He just is. That's the way it is. He gets his jollies by making people anxious. So there's not a lot of police work that can happen. And he could be over there using VPNs in everything anyway. And we may never find this guy. We may track him for 3 weeks and never figure out exactly who he is. That's why law enforcement doesn't take every case seriously, because they can't. They're not all serious to start with, and you never know until they escalate.
And that's, I get that too. And I know that they have to investigate each case before they get involved, or, let themselves get the little bit of emotionally involved at all. But I think too, when we see in the Keon King case or with Kada Scott, I think there's a lot of people who are upset because he had previously been arrested and actually was supposed to have a trial for kidnapping and strangulation of another victim. And because that victim didn't show up to court, those charges were dropped. So there's a lot of people saying, and then, he continued on with these stalking behaviors. So there's a lot of people that are angry about that, which, I understand. But I think, we do see a lot of people like that continue to fall through the cracks because, that's just how our justice system plays out.
That's why they try to get as much of the hard evidence. Like, you'll have a lot of domestic violence crimes. And we know that domestic violence crimes, the people make up, they, fall back in love. People sometimes just won't get out of a bad situation. And we understand that. Law enforcement understands that. So what they do is they'll take a lot of photographs, they'll get statements, video recorded statements, and the prosecutor can go forward with all of that. You can be deemed a hostile witness, even if it's you're the victim, just because now you're not on the law enforcement side. And I've seen a lot of convictions happen because law enforcement proactive, doing it, get all the evidence while it's fresh, arrest everybody, and maybe he makes a confession or a partial confession or something, and use that to prosecute him even without the victim. So you can go forward without a victim. Now, in this case, it sounds to me, I don't know all the details of that, I'll be honest with you, but in that case, he did have prior offenses, and it doesn't sound like they did that. And I'm going to tell you, law enforcement and the system right now, the system is allowing people to get away with things. And what happens when your little kid get away with something, or you let your dog get away with something? I got away with it, I can do it again. So then they do more, and they almost inevitably escalate, and they go higher. They always want to get a little bit more. They get a little greedy. So it turns into, it's like, well, I can do it. I don't have a ramification. Why not? And they think at that point that they'll probably get away with it again. So we've given them this, hopefully, artificial security that they're going to be able to keep committing crimes. It's like letting people get away with shoplifting and raise the price. It's like, well, you can be, try to be nice and understand the situation. And I do. And we maybe need to change some things so people aren't in those situations. But justifying criminal activity or diminishing criminal activity only leads to escalation, and it only leads to a reoccurrence.
Yeah, and I think that's why, there is that frustration, because we see with those types of cases, there is that escalation, right? How someone, goes from a peeping Tom to then breaking and entering to then maybe stealing a few items to then maybe kidnapping a person. And I feel like we are seeing it happen time and time again. And, we're hearing the stories of victims trying to get restraining orders and them being denied. And it's hard to talk about specific cases because I know they're all so different. But I guess, what are some of the solutions in your mind to this? Like, how do victims, best protect themselves when it comes to these types of cases?
Count on yourself, protect yourself, do the right things from the beginning. Don't expose yourself too much. Situational awareness. I can try not to get political here, but the way that we hold our politicians to account, whether it be voting or letters or pressure from whatever, needs to get to that point. Restraining orders are a good thing and a bad thing. I see them abused by victims that aren't really victims because it gets pressure. It's like, well, I'll show him, he cheated on me and went off with this other woman. I'll get, and I don't like the way that they infringe on people's rights. I'm okay with stay away orders and, you can't come around this person, you can't touch this person, whatever, that's fine. But when they start taking away people's rights and it becomes a public record that creates obviously a stigma on that person without your Fourth Amendment and your right to, a trial to, guard your rights. I don't like that system that much because I have seen it abused. At the same time, take away that, it becomes a great system. And then when people violate those, it shouldn't be just like, hey, don't do it again. It should be, guess what? You're spending 15 days in jail.
I think too, well, for me, it becomes difficult because it's like, if it is someone who is going to harass and stalk in the first place, and, maybe they will spend some time in jail, then they come out and then they do it again. Like what is the deterrence factor, right? If jail is not a deterrence, if this behavior, if this obsession is so great, and I feel like in cases we have seen, because these obsessions are so great that it actually causes someone to take an actual life, then I can kind of understand, okay, we can throw this person in jail, but only so many times.
If they get to, here's the thing, and that's why you have recidivity laws like 3 strikes, you're out, things like that, which aren't always good. I mean, it's like they have to be defined better. If some kid steals a car when he's 18 years old because he's running with a bunch of bad kids, and then he gets in a fight and gets an assault at 22 years old, and then at 31 years old gets, another innocuous charge. That's not 3 strikes. But if they're repetitive, boom, 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 maybe if they're young, you keep them away for a while. Maybe it becomes an enhancement, not just wash the hands of this person in the system. I think that sex crimes and stalking usually is about sex crimes. I think that those people have something wrong with them that maybe can't ever be helped. I don't necessarily believe that they can be always especially cured of that problem. I think that there should be more punishment. And I think that, again, I'm going to pick on politicians because they go there and they want to seem as if they're somehow I don't know, kind. And so they want to give those people a break. And I think those are the wrong people to give the break to. I do believe that there has to be a lot of evidence before you wash yourself and throw away a person. Okay. But once you get to that point, I don't care if they're crazy. I think this whole thing, oh, they're crazy, they have a mental deficiency, they have this, then they shouldn't be around the population. We got to protect the people, not the crazy. Keep them comfortable, keep them fed, give them books, whatever it takes, try to help them, but not at the risk of the rest of the population.
You see these people slip through the cracks time and time again, and then you see the end results, which obviously, there's too many horrific situations and murders where lives are lost.
Slipping through the cracks is one thing. I've watched the justice system. They're not slipping through the cracks. There's big wide open doors, and they're just keep opening them and closing and letting people out. And I think it's a horrible way to try to do it. I mean, compassion is one thing, stupidity is another.
And one last thing I wanted to talk to you about too, which is a little different, but online harassment, extortion. I was wondering if you ever see it in your career, which I know is happening more now, but like young teens and sextortion virtually, is that something which, because I feel like it kind of fits into that whole like online harassment category. And I think this
Sure.
is something that people like don't necessarily really want to talk about, but I can imagine with AI, it's going to start happening even more now.
Oh yeah, but it's also an out too. We do a lot of revenge porn cases. In California, you can go to jail for, if you're dating a guy and you guys had an event that you videotaped or something, he's like, "Oh, you break up with me? I'm going to send this to your mom." That kind of thing. You can go to jail for it. That's, it's extortion. So there are laws in place. I don't necessarily like the new laws, but extortion's been on the books for a long time. So when people do those things, it's a crime. They'll go to jail and they think that they're protected. You're protected maybe for a little while. As soon as somebody really, really wants to get after you, you're caught. They'll catch you because that stuff's forever. And you can use VPNs and they'll bounce. And if you've done something bad enough, it will come back to you. It just depends on how bad they want to catch you.
And I think it's always so heartbreaking when we see the cases of teenagers taking their lives because of it, because, even in like the span of a 12-hour span, right? It can escalate so quickly, from making, one decision can end up in you maybe taking your life because of how much pressure these people are putting on them, which is horrible. And those are, I guess, the more professional people, right? The ones that like do this as a profession, taking advantage
It,
of people.
the people that are going to be susceptible, like you said, the young teenage girls and things like that, some boys put into situations. We've had that too.
Yeah, we have seen boys.
Um, what's that?
So yeah, we have seen boys. I can think of
Yes,
some
absolutely.
cases.
Yeah. And it's tragic, but at the same time, you need to, if they're there, you as a parent should know it. They don't always, and it's not always their fault that they don't. But you should kind of be aware and caution kids on some of those things. Again, it's situational awareness, just the situations in your own house. It's just this window that you have. So you're creating situations that are a little bit dangerous or maybe just embarrassing. And that's all that really is. It's an embarrassing situation that will go away. And it's not the end of the world. I've never see it be the end of the world. It's a bump in the road and you get by it. So it's very sad that these children feel that that is a moment that is worth taking your life for when it's really not. And to even not be close enough to your children to let them know if something like that comes around, it's so small compared to your life that you have to learn how to evaluate those things. It's like we as a society, and it's changed and that evolution's been good, but the whole sexual thing that we put on people morality wise and what should happen, what shouldn't happen in the judgment is what we have to tell kids isn't important. And older people too. I mean, it's not just kids. I mean, we've seen older adults, commit suicide or likely commit suicide. I have a lot of clients that are older, women have just got back into the dating after being married for 10 years and something like this happens to them. And men too. I mean, they get in situations just as much.
Yeah.
And it's embarrassed. They don't want their job to know. They don't want their boss to know. And it's like, you know what? The best thing you can tell those people is go ahead, do it. And if they do, because half the time they're bluffing anyway. But if they do, then it's over. They've lost their power, so they're not going to.
Yeah.
It's all about power and money.
Yep, definitely. I know. I'm sure we could go into the romance scammers all day, and how their control and their manipulation. I've done some stories on that too. I think it's interesting and like almost terrifying when the romance scammer is able to like manipulate their, I guess, victim into then like helping them with the scam and becoming, and then also having them start doing the illegal activity as well.
Yeah, unknowingly most of the time. And it's just, they'll say, "Oh, this person's my assistant. They're going to send you $10,000, and now I'm going to give you
Yeah.
back, five of yours back that I borrowed from you out of that and send me the other 5,000, check it into my Coinbase account." And yeah, we see a lot of it, but seriously, everybody, if you're watching this and you think you're in love with somebody online that you have never held in your presence, don't give them 10 cents ever. And I've
They
had very, very
need to
smart
go.
people. Yeah. It's just there's a reason that you can't say, and they lie, they make up the best justifications. Oh, I'm on government contracts, I'm a doctor here. All the doctor pictures they had were some poor plastic surgeon down in South America, just doing his job. Now he's all over the internet as a con artist. And it's like I can't get out of my contract unless I can get 150,000. And I need that as fast as I can. I can't get any money while I'm here because I'm on base. I can't transfer anything, but I'll be able to transfer you a bunch of it back. And I've seen women lose millions of dollars, literally.
I know. I never, it's hard to understand, right? It's hard to understand how, but I know, some these women, they're educated. A lot of them are educated. A lot of them have worked very hard in their
Attorney.
life. They have a lot of money, right? They've
Yeah,
like worked very hard at their careers. They're extremely educated and smart. And it's all about the manipulator, the abuser, who's able to break them down, be able to say the right things, and being able to do like what you said, talking about, oh, I just need this money, I'll pay you back. Oh, and I think back to what you were talking about too, more with like children and their parents. I think sometimes not having those conversations probably comes from like a lack of comfortability, but also I think to a lack of education. I think we're starting to realize a lot more the power of the internet and the power of what pictures we take and we send out.
sure. And unfortunately, a lot of the people don't understand the ability, how easily people can come into your children's lives through the computer. I mean, you just think you're playing games. I mean, look what happened with Roblox. And excuse me for a second. Something on my desk is making a vibration. No.
No worries.
So there's all these windows into your life, and people will come through them. So your children need to be educated on it, and you need to take charge of it. I mean, maybe as your kids start getting older and you understand that they understand things. My kids are kind of lucky because they've lived my life, so they see a lot.
Yeah.
They hear the conversations and they know. And my adult daughter, she's very brazen, and I mean, she carries a weapon all the time, and she's always armed. She's always ready. She knows the world. She's a very good investigator, actually. And so they live it, so they see it. They've got a maturity level that's a little bit different. It's, you know, most cops' kids don't fall into those unless the cop doesn't ever talk to his family. And there's a lot of cops that don't. The last thing they want to do is think about their job when they get home. I love this job. I love what I do. It's very different every day. So the different cases that come through, they meet the other investigators that are around, they hear the stories, and they understand the way the world works that way. So you just got to find a way to interject those things that can affect your children into your conversations. And that's just the reality of it.
Yeah. Now more than ever too. And I always, when I speak with people about this, I bring up, I feel like there were so many websites that my friends and I were going on when we were younger, like those virtual chat websites where you talk with people around the world. Thinking back to like some of the risks or some of the things that could have happened that luckily never happened. I think, it was a different time then. I think maybe now it would have been a little different, but it's just like, and I think, my parents talked to me about a lot of other stuff, but when it came to like the dangers of the internet, I was growing up with Facebook and everything. It was all kind of new at that time.
So
So,
it's expanded since then. It
yes,
wasn't the format that it is now. Even though,
yes,
even back when MySpace was on, people were trolling MySpace and people were
yeah,
hitting kids up. Even when it was mail up, they were doing things. It just didn't become as prolific, and everybody else wasn't on all the time. So now your parents probably have different things that they're looking at, whether it be news or anything else on the Amazon, whatever.
yeah.
You that access is still back and forth into your life, and it's expanded into your kids, and you just accept it, but you're not necessarily thinking about all the threats that are out there. They're well known, and you can look them up. And maybe that's the other thing, educate yourself a little bit. Kids are
Don't ignore
probably,
it.
yeah. Well, if you ignore it, then it's just at your own peril. You can't ignore the world and hide. You can't do the ostrich thing. You have to actually protect yourself against everything. It's like we buy alarms for our houses and gates and move into gated communities and get security guards and everything else. And then we think that we don't have anything else. And those are just ornamental security, really.
Yeah. Well, Andy Kay, we have a few minutes here, but I wanted to ask you, is there any other advice, going off of the harassment and stalking, any last words you want to leave the viewers with? And hopefully we can talk again because there's so many different cases that I either work on in my professional world, or I, just follow along in the national news media. And I think, there's so much power in conversation. And if at least one person learns something from this podcast, then that will be the whole point. So I appreciate you coming on, but any last words you want to leave the viewers with?
Just, things we already talked about, really. Situational awareness is the most important thing. Keeping your private life private. Don't let people know too much about you. And with my clients, when I get them, we really go through to try to I can make you invisible online. I can make it so they can't find you. And that's the ideal situation. Because if you hired a private investigator, you wouldn't find my house. You'd think you did, but you would never find my house. So that's probably the best thing. That's what will make you the most secure, is not even knowing where to find the target. Don't interact with crazy people. Stay away. Just avoid conflicts if you can. Situational awareness. Always know what's going on around you. And just think of weak spots. Look at your life and say, hey, how would I get into it?
And
Excuse me.
oh, last thing, would you recommend, I guess, if people aren't getting the help they need from law enforcement, would you recommend that they reach out to a private investigator? Like, kind of, when does that private investigation come in for people?
At whatever point you think that it's getting too much for you to deal with on your own. And if you don't feel like law enforcement's dealing with it, call us.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. It was good talking to you.